What up, Pod Squad? Welcome back to another edition of the Victorious POD. We are coming at you with Season 6, Episode 24, which I don't know when we're going to restart the new season, but we're Episode 102 overall, so that's fun. Last time we had you coming in with some free agency reactions and predictions and stuff. Now we get to cover the super fun NFL Draft reactions. So we're going to get into some Dynasty stuff, talking about rookies, different landing spots, all the stuff that we got right and none of the stuff that we got wrong, of course, and more fun stuff. But for now, Tyler, welcome back. How's things?
It's good, and it's starting to now feel like we're getting back into NFL season. I
You
couldn't be
checked
more
back in.
excited about it. I'm checked back in. Yeah, last episode I was way checked out. They're like, "What's happening? Who's moved where?" I'm like, I have no idea. So it's always fun. I love doing NFL draft bets, even though I did mediocre at best with some of them. But it just to me it feels like the NFL starting to get back. Rookie mini camps and things like that starting up. So now we're getting into the swing of things.
For sure. Everybody's going to all be Hall of Famers and nobody is busts and anything at
That's
this
right.
point. So the
Yeah.
excitement is awesome.
Everybody's peak right now.
Quick couple of housekeeping stuff just before we get into it. Discord, as always, if you want to hop into there, that's where we're going to be posting more of our stuff. Hopefully, we'll get a little bit more excitement in there over the off season. But if you have questions, reactions, and just want to discuss with other fantasy football minded people. Additionally, this last episode that we uploaded already, if you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. But we're back on YouTube officially. We're doing all video episodes going forward here. So we've somewhat figured out how to be tech savvy again and not implode everything. So
Yeah.
with switching to that for our last full length episode, and then a bunch more shorts that we're doing just for some content in between these monthly episodes. But we've got up to 112 subs, so we appreciate all the new subscribers. 9 more since last time, which is great.
hmm
So we have our own official handle because we're professional and famous. So youtube.com/@thevictoriouspod, all one word. You can pull it up on a browser or just go on the YouTube app. We really appreciate if you subscribe just to get notifications and help us out and stuff like that. So more of that. We'll be doing more shorts and just kind of engagement stuff until we get into the full season swing of things. And then social media, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff will be linked in the notes below. So without further ado, let's get into some actual excitement stuff. Based on the last few videos, we had actually like a decent amount of interaction, primarily on YouTube comments. So I just wanted to shout a couple of people out. First, we had Midi80, who's a friend of the show. He was saying, and this was again 3 weeks ago, so prior to the draft, but he was saying, based on our last episode, one team that he thinks is going to surprise everybody this year is the Bears. Quote unquote, I feel like they made a lot of great moves in the offseason so far with signings. Do you think that they win the division? ... Take the bias out. I really think they have a good chance of surprising a lot of people. What do you think? So just any quick thoughts before we cover that stuff later?
Yeah, it's kind of tough. I mean, I think they did great in NFL free agency as well. They certainly with trading out of the pick and getting the capital that they got and getting DJ Moore is obviously another good weapon for them. So I think it's going to be kind of a three-horse race. I don't know how much I trust Jordan Love. I mean, everybody in Green Bay seem to think he's the next coming, but I think it's going to be a pretty tight race in the NFC North this year.
My 2 cents would be, I think it's going to be more of a 2-horse race. I think it's going to be Vikings and Lions could go either way. I think it'll be whether the Bears and Packers end up in the bottom or not. And I see the Bears slightly beating the Packers, but I agree that
hmm
they have made a ton of improvements and did great this offseason. I just don't think that puts them in the I'm going to win the
Yeah,
division tier. So
yeah.
they're on the right track. They made some good moves. They traded the one pick like we were both saying they should have, but not quite there yet to be a threat. So
Yeah.
another comment of his quick. He wants to hear us talk a little bit about winners and losers from the free agency and draft. We'll cover that in a little bit, but we appreciate the comments from you there. We also had a couple of users that I'm not familiar with, but we appreciate you guys joining in on our shorts. We had JG97722 kind of disputing Tyler's little short video about the Lions not hating Swift. I think that take has maybe not aged greatly
Yeah.
since that's happened, but he was kind of more of the impression that it's not that the Lions hate Swift, quote unquote, it's that he's more just made of glass, which is true. Has all the talent, but isn't reliable enough to be a 3-down guy. So Tyler, you had some good insights on this, but I'll let you, if you wanted to weigh in any more, since that's changed, obviously.
Yeah, I think we certainly have a lot more clarity, and it's obvious that they did indeed hate DeAndre Swift, and I get it from what it sounded like. The coaching staff were truly like, we did everything we could to get this guy healthy in our building, and he couldn't stay healthy. Some of the quotes that I read, and you can go look them up for yourself. But a lot of them were like literally said, "Hey, we did whatever we could, and he couldn't get on the field." So it was
Yep.
true frustration from what it was. So obviously it was a huge surprise for them to move up to 12 and get Gibbs. That's massive draft capital and a running back when we haven't really even seen a day one running back in the last couple of years or very tail end. So obviously they were ready to move on, and so the writing was on the wall as soon as they drafted Gibbs. Him being an amazing receiving back himself and being able to take on that workload, and they shipped Swift off to Philly, which again, coincidentally, phenomenal landing spot for him. Plenty of competition there. They love the Boston Scotts of the world. They love the Kenneth Gainwells. But yeah, it was pretty evident that the Lions were like, all right, we're getting Gibbs and we're done with Swift.
Yeah, I mean, nobody really saw it coming, which we'll get into the Gibbs analysis a little bit later. But I think everybody saw the writing on the wall as soon as they drafted him. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, there's no feasible way you can justify keeping Swift on top of the other free agency signing with Montgomery. So it was quickly coming. So that take along with this next one didn't age super well, but again, 3 weeks ago, you gotta call your shots where you can. So
Yeah.
another user wrote in, Chad Kupchik. Apologies if I'm pronouncing the name wrong, but basically his take was just us saying that Swift was hated by the Lions. He said, "Well, Swift's better than Jamal Williams." I'm like, I don't know if last season was true. Maybe career wise they're about even because they've both not really done a whole lot, but
Mm-hmm.
I think this year it would be interesting with both of them on new teams, seeing who ends up doing more because Jamal Williams is going to get the first crack at it with Kamara probably suspended. So that's,
Mm-hmm.
it could end up being a more interesting take than it was when you first commented in. So we'll we'll see what happens there. But lastly, we had another user quick just write in on one of Tyler's shorts talking about some NFL draft bits and bets and stuff like that. Matthew Carson said that the Hooker line being a top pick, the Hendon Hooker, was at plus 9,500. Yeah, well, he was not a top anything first round pick, so
Yeah,
that's how
so
it
those are
goes.
those are tough sometimes. When you get where about the timing he was that he commented that was probably 3 or 4 days before the draft, and I mean obviously I made a video on it. The steam was starting to come in that Hendon Hooker could be a back end of the first round draft pick, and some of the times we see that we got good value in the bet that we put in there, so I have no issue with it. I'm like I literally got it at essentially even money, and by the time it closed, it was like minus 300. So again, just because you get a bet and you're on the right side of the steam doesn't mean you're going to get it right. Plus 100 means 50-50 shot. Plus 300 is essentially like a 25 to 30% shot. That'd be on the plus 300 side. Minus 300, again, vice versa, 60-70% probability. Probability, not 100%, but so you're not going to win them all. And obviously, they took into account coming off major knee surgery and ACL, turning 25. He's older than some quarterbacks that are already in the league. So just again, it just shows you betting is betting. You're still gambling, just because you're on the right side of the money doesn't mean you're always going to be right. We never know what's going to happen inside the NFL locker rooms.
Right. Most of the NFL personnel or different teams don't even know
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen, so it's not
Yeah.
surprising. I do think, like, quick toss in at the on the Hooker side. I think if Levis hadn't fallen as much as he had, we would have seen Hooker rise. Maybe not still
Mm-hmm.
in the first, but I think we could have seen him go in like early second, where Levis ended up if Levis had been pulled in the first. Just that panic pick of there's really no other quarterbacks left that could feasibly end up being a starter for your team. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
kind of hurt him more than
Yeah.
anything. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
anyway, we appreciate everybody's quick comments, and it kind of gives us a nice springboard to start off with some discussion stuff. So, going off of predictions, we're going to kind of try to cover our own predictions since we're doing more and more shorts here. But we're going to cover good and bad calls from the previous episodes and
Mm-hmm.
shorts since our last main episode. So really quick, Tyler and I kind of both did our own versions of rookie landing spot predictions prior to the draft. Just running through ones that we actually got right, which there were a few. I had Bryce as well as Tyler, obviously both going to Carolina, which was
Mm-hmm.
pretty much locked in at that point. I did have Stroud going to the Texans correctly, which to be honest, I was banking more on them picking him at 12, but they stuck with it at 2, as they should have done. And then Bijan to Atlanta, which was kind of like the very beginning of where he could have ended up. Close misses that I had. We both talked about how we were probably going to get the position, but not the player right for teams. I had Levis, not Anthony Richardson, going to the Colts. I had Gibbs, not A-Chain, going to Miami, and I had Quentin Johnson, not Zay Flowers, going to Baltimore. So almost there. And over to
Yeah.
Tyler.
Yeah, pretty much like Jack said, I kind of went contrarian for a lot of mine. And again, I think I really picked out, I did well on kind of the over-unders with wide receivers and where they were going to land, or over-under kind of that 22 mark, because we saw 20, 21, 22, 23. wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. So pretty much did exactly that. I got the chain to the Dolphins. That was a pretty fun one. And then I really just mixed up all the receivers and where they ended up landing. Uh, I had Quentin Johnson to Minnesota, and Addison went to Minnesota. I had Zay going to the Chargers, and Quentin Johnson went to the Chargers. So yeah, I think I got all the wide receivers and where they were ultimately going to land as far as landing spots, just to which teams. So if nothing else, that's what you're trying to do: identify what are the main needs of the teams, and I think we did pretty good at that.
Other than the running backs, which besides Bijan, everybody said, let's
Yeah.
just take the running backs in the worst possible landing spots. So
They were all horrible from a fantasy perspective. I think anybody in the fantasy community just wants to cry right now. We're like, why did the Seahawks draft three running backs or whatever? I'm like, come on.
I was so
It's,
upset.
yeah,
The,
not only
the
Charm,
one
but
that
they also
was
took McIntosh. I'm like, come on,
right
guys.
on top of that, I'm like, it was already bad enough. The one that was crazy was you almost had the Stroud to Tennessee correctly because there were those reports
hmm
that they were trying to trade up and get him, which I was like, that almost happened. So thank God Houston
So
stuck and
close.
said we'll take the top three picks. Thank you.
Agreed.
You also had a couple of correct bets. I know we were talking
Hmm.
before, but if you want to shout those guys out,
Yeah, we had the Zay Flowers. He was listed at under 22 and a half as far as draft position, and I said he wasn't going to fall beyond the Baltimore Chargers and whoever the other one was in that 20 range. He wasn't going to fall past one of those three. He ended up falling further than I expected him. I thought he was going to go at 20. So he ended up going at 22, thankfully, to Baltimore. But hey, I will take it. 22 is under 22 and a half, so I
yeah,
will take it. And then first round wide receivers, again, just pretty much as expected. Although we got pretty good juice. I think it was only like minus 130 to go over 3.5. So I thought there was really a truly solid four, and then potentially a Jalen Hyatt was even going to give us a five. Obviously, he didn't end up going in the first, but I figured with that potential, it was a perfect bet for us. So hit two of those, missed the offensive lineman bet. Turns out it was a little bit of a smokescreen with Peter Skoronsky trying to be a guard and his short arms. They're like, we love the versatility, but we need true offensive tackles that are going to be able to anchor the outsides and protect the quarterback's blind spot. So they went with the Paris Johnson Jr. So missed that one, but the other two, we'll take those two hits.
yep, love it. The only other quick one to shout out that we haven't covered, just before, as we get into our rookie draft rankings and breakdowns and stuff, a quick preview to that was on our last episode. Tyler actually said pre-draft that it made the most sense to be drafting Anthony Richardson as the home run swing of all three quarterbacks, and then especially the landing spot didn't hurt. But pretty
Mm-hmm.
much consensus everywhere in dynasty communities is AR as the QB1 in this draft over Bryson Stroud. So had that one before it was cool, aka Tyler did. So
Yeah, I mean, it just makes sense, and
yeah,
for where the NFL is going nowadays and now years, and especially now that they've come out and really said AR is groomed to be the starter. But you've seen kind of the opposite camp out of Carolina. They're like, hey, Bryce is going to battle. He's not QB1. He's coming
yeah,
in here
that's
and he's got
crazy.
to. I'm like, that's insane.
Right?
And great, maybe it's just hearsay, and you love to hype it up and whatnot. And
Yeah,
Bryce ultimately wins out, and doesn't matter now. It's just coach speak. But for the Colts to come out and say AR is number one, he's got it. That's insane, and obviously he's going to push him up draft boards. And the rushing upside is incredible. We saw his
right.
combine. We saw the athleticism. If there was any doubt that he was the QB1 in Superflex dynasty leagues, not QB1 overall, in the rookie drafts, that just solidified it for me.
It does make me curious because this is probably like the landing spot of all landing spots for him. Where had Bryson Stroud stayed where they ended up, and say he did go to like say Anthony Richardson went to Tennessee, where there's really no
Mm-hmm.
receiving threat options, or he goes to the Raiders who have a terrible offensive line, for example, like not as good of landing spots. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious if the entire community still felt like the rushing ability put him up above, or if they'd be going more for those safe things. So
Yeah, we'll take it. We'll take it.
yeah.
It's a good spot for him.
All right, moving into our ship it or skip it, kind of our chance to just throw out some rapid fire questions and see what our reactions are. So this one I kind of scanned the Pro Football Focus post draft questions for each team basically, and just found some fantasy relevant ones that seemed fun. So first off here, how do you feel about Lamar now fantasy wise post free agency, excuse me, slash draft? He obviously signed his huge contract, which is good. He's actually playing now. They
Mm-hmm.
went out and have gotten a couple of free agency big pickups, and then now they spent their first round pick on Zay Flowers. Where are you at with him coming into the year?
Yeah, I think you got to love it. They have clearly said, "Hey, we're committing. We want you here in Baltimore. We did everything in the draft to make sure you had a billion weapons to play with. Please don't leave." And that's exactly what they did. They put their money where their mouth is and got him signed. They did so in the draft and to make him extremely happy. Even the OBJ is obviously going to be better NFL wise than it is going to be fantasy wise, but it's still another person you got to account for. So I think they just really put everything into that offense and said, "Hey, Lamar and the offense carry us, and hopefully our defense can continue to be relatively middle of the pack." But that's going to be a pretty high flying offense to have to account for Lamar and now all of those receiving weapons they have, all the way down to Mark Andrews as well. People
Right.
sometimes are like, "Hey, he had a little bit of an off season last year. Lamar was hurt. I don't discount him. He's still a top two tight end."
I still think he's the clear number one
Yeah.
receiving option fantasy wise by the time the season's over with. But yeah, my chips are all 100% back in on Lamar. Like that, I
Hmm.
don't think any quarterback had a better offseason as far as weapons and
Yeah.
like team around them than he did. And he's obviously got like the QB1 overall upside just with his rushing. So I think based on that, I think the ceiling is so high where he's kind of one of the only guys that can really rival that Jalen Hurts 2022 season last year.
Hmm.
We remember like his MVP season, and obviously he's a couple of years removed from that, but this is by far the best weapons he's ever had. So I think if you're gonna ever get a season where he puts it together, obviously assuming health, it's going to be this one just based on the talent alone. I don't see any one of these really receivers as somebody I'm interested in, like
Hmm.
going to get as far as redraft or dynasty wise, because I think it's going to be so spread out, and it's already historically known as one of the smaller pies passing wise. But I think for Lamar alone, this could be very, very interesting. So I would be all in buying on him now before people continue to get the hype train going. So
Yeah,
move,
agreed. I saw him. I saw him on most recent rankings. I saw him as like QB5,
yeah,
so not
I
not
like that.
bad. So the one that I thought was interesting that was above him, and again, I get efficiency wise and the same type of weapons was Burrow. So I had Mahomes,
Yep.
Josh Allen, Hurts, Burrow, and then Lamar. So I was like, I don't know, I might with everything and that rushing potential, I might put him at the 4 spot. I saw even like Justin Fields up there as well, but I'm like, I'm still taking Lamar over. Yeah, Justin Fields was like 6 over like the Justin Herberts of the world. I'm like, Justin Herbert just flings it. He just throws it around.
Right.
Again, that rushing upside is kind of exactly like we've spoken to. So QB 4 5 for this upcoming year felt about right.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I think I'm still fine if you want to lock in those top three as the safer options, just because, again,
Hmm.
Lamar hasn't done it for a year or two. But assuming he plays, I think there's nobody else that's more of a lock to be a league winner than him.
Yeah.
So, number two, moving into obviously, we talked a little bit about Jahmyr Gibbs being drafted to Detroit. If you had to put your money on it right now for just this coming season, Gibbs in Detroit versus DeAndre Swift now in Philadelphia for fantasy.
Give me Gibbs in Detroit. And for the lone fact that, again, Jalen Hurts is incredible. We've seen how many rushing touchdowns he can take, and they just push him when they get anywhere near the goal line. And Swift wasn't the goal line back when he was in Detroit. So I'm not saying he wouldn't be that, but they love Boston Scott. They love Kenneth Gainwell when they get down there as well. And they all dispel each other relatively well. I mean, they even did so with Miles Sanders last year. So I don't think he's going to get enough of that goal line work to be as relevant as potentially Gibbs is. And I'm not saying Gibbs is going to get the goal line work as well. But when you got your quarterback siphoning off some of those rushing touchdowns, at least in Detroit, Jared Goff's probably not stealing a lot of those. So it sounds like Detroit is absolutely smitten with Gibbs in pretty much every way. So give me Gibbs over Swift in 2023.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think kind of part of going off of what you just said, the fact that there's so many other options to worry about beyond just Jalen Hurts.
Right.
You didn't even mention too, but I still like Rashad Penny, who obviously was the guy up until they traded for Swift. I wouldn't be surprised if we get to draft season and Swift is being drafted way too high based on everybody being like his potential and this is the year and blah, blah. And Penny falls down to like 10 plus rounds area where you could get him. And again, for the, 30% of the year that he's actually healthy, I think he could be the guy where
Hmm.
he gets that Jamal Williams role where it's like, okay, even if Swift is getting all the third down and like more touches per game, Penny's going to be the goal line guy that gets a couple touchdowns and wins you the week. So I could see
Hmm.
him still being a thorn in DeAndre Swift's side, but more of an undervalued one. So
Yep,
Plus, I
agreed.
like Gibbs, so that's where I'm at.
Yeah, facts. I'm with you. I'm like, I'm gonna have him on one of my teams as well, so I'm all in. And I have DeAndre Swift as well. I'm actually gonna have them both on one of my dynasty teams.
It's the high upside, the home run swings. Both of them feel like that.
Yeah,
Like he very much feels like he's being drafted as what Gibbs was supposed to be, or what Swift was supposed to be. Excuse me. So
for sure.
yeah, it'll be interesting. They'll both be fun to watch. But moving into same division with the NFC North, but we got to talk about our Vikings, obviously. So what did you think of the
hmm
Vikings draft overall this year?
Not bad. I think in kind of that first round, I'm with you. We talked a little bit about it off air. There was so much defense that kind of fell. I think we had other holes that we could have plugged with higher profile names at the 23 spot than wide receiver. But I'm never going to complain about getting Jordan Addison at 23 as well. So incredible receiver, Biletnikoff winner, has amazing hands, incredible routes. Just had a little bit of a down year, so he kind of fell down draft boards. But there was a time when he was the consensus one. Him and JSN were right there, neck and neck. So I like it. I love it for the Vikings in general. Great replacement for Thielen. But I would have probably liked to see us improve on the defensive side because that was our absolute Achilles heel last year.
Yeah, there were a few guys at key positions that kept falling, and they were still there in like the 20 round or 20ish area where I was like, oh my gosh,
hmm
this would be perfect. So I think if you're going to go offense, like you said, like Jordan Addison was my number 2 wide receiver, and I think it makes sense, and I think it'll be very exciting. But I
hmm
wouldn't have hated going into the draft with technically Hawkinson as our second receiving option and
Yeah.
KJ Osborne as a third. I think that would have been fine.
hmm
Whereas defense was so bad last year, and I think that's what separated us. So like, I think that I'm gonna like phrase how I say this, but I think the casual Vikings fan was more happy with Jordan Addison because it's just like
Yes.
pick an offensive player, pick somebody that's well known, and I'm going to be excited. But it's like you got to build your team a little bit with more of these guys that are like it's not the
hmm
exciting or sexy pick, but if you're like shoring up like a young corner or an edge rusher or
hmm
something to make a difference, I think that would have helped us more just with like best like versus the next projected starter, for example. So I had Deontay Banks on my list for a while, cornerback out of Maryland, I believe, and I was really excited for him.
hmm
And he went like 2 picks after us. There was Breesy and Miles Murphy at the edge, and then Nolan Smith, who went down to 31 to
hmm
the Eagles, which would have been amazing. So I was sad
Yeah.
about those.
I was definitely sad about those as well, because there was at one point that Nolan Smith was mocked to the Eagles at 10, and they were 100% before their trade going to take him at 10. From everything that I've read since the draft, they were like, "Oh well, we're just gonna we need this. Jalen Carter's still there. This is so ridiculous. Nobody thought he was gonna get out of the top 5, top
Right.
6." Whatever it was. And then with that little bit of fall because of the Texans trading back up to 3 and taking defense, then all of a sudden it was like, oh, great, there's still quarterbacks left. We can go get a couple. So then all of a sudden he's outside of the top 5. And we're like, damn, the Seahawks didn't get him either. Oh, my God. So we got to go up and get him. So they're like, hey, essentially, sorry, Nolan Smith. We didn't think there was any way Jalen Carter was going to be here. So we did that. Turns out then he fell all the way down to them at 30. So they really
So bad.
got, yeah, they had one of the biggest winners of the draft for sure. Eagles, no question.
Yeah, 100%. We don't have to go through every single one of our other 5 picks or so, but was there
Hmm.
anyone else that standed out to you as like favorite for where they were picked at?
Nothing crazy. I mean, honestly, I know it was in the 7th, but I like the Dwayne McBride.
Yes.
Coming into it, I actually had a little bit of a deep dive, and I've looked at some of my notes and actually had him on kind of my like actual dynasty notes till his draft capital was crazy. So he was one to keep an eye on, and with everything up at the air so much with Dalvin and really just having Mattinson, I like the pickup. It was certainly didn't cost a lot of draft capital, and he's somebody who had good college production. So I liked that as a 7th round pick.
Yeah, I agree. He was going to be my pick too, where if we do end up figuring out whatever the hell we're doing with Cook and we move on from him, I
hmm
wouldn't be surprised if McBride contributes quickly. From
hmm
like the little bit of film I've watched, and they talk about he's very good at breaking tackles. He's very good at picking up yards after contact, and like kind
hmm
of the same role that we need right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if we actually move on. If I would feel in a good spot with Madison and then a potential him coming in. So
Yeah.
I like what we did. I don't know how many of these guys are going to be day one contributors. Like the 3rd round pick, Mekhi Blackman, I think at corner, I think he could easily be our 3rd best corner now without
Yeah.
doing anything.
hmm
So hopefully, whether he's the slot or technically the CB2 while somebody else plays the slot. I think he could play right away, but I don't know enough about him to know that I'm feeling great or if it's just a product of our terrible secondary. So we'll see.
Accurate. Yes.
All right. Moving into a little bit more league specific stuff, we're going to slide into our officially the password is Taco League, since that's the dynasty going on, versus Victoria's Secret, which is just redraft. So we're going to get into our Jack of all trades segment, which is always one of our favorites to discuss. We're going to talk about some real live trades that were made in our dynasty league, just so you guys can kind of apply it to yours and see, deals that are really getting done versus what makes sense on paper or on Keep Trade Cut. So with the rookie draft happening for us that happened this past Monday, there was a lot of movement going on, mostly draft picks. So I'll break down the picks or the trades, and I'll kind of let you guys know who the picks became, which obviously hindsight, like you don't know what they're going to become or who's going to be there at that point, but it helps to put a name to the number. So I'll say them, and then I'll let Tyler, you can kind of give your thoughts first, and I'll just fill in. So first one, we had this pains me still. We had a trade between Joe and Glick. I won't tell you guys who was who. The trade was the 108, which ended up becoming Zach Charbonnet, who was later traded again, so that doesn't matter as much. Plus David Bell, who I had to look up and figure out that he played for the
Purdue.
Purdue. For Amari Cooper and James Conner. So go ahead.
I don't want to.
Perfect.
Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. It's absolutely crazy. And not only, like you said, again, Sharp got traded elsewhere, but he's already in a terrible landing spot. Literally didn't know who David Bell was. He's maybe the fourth option now on the Browns, because now that Elijah Moore's on the Browns as well, they take over all the slot stuff. Like, David Bell was a great college receiver. I loved David Bell coming into the year. I tried to do trade Foster about 14 times before the actual season started. Believe me, because I was a David Bell believer. And I'm not saying he's not going to be just fine, but there's a lot of mouths to feed there in Cleveland. And one of those mouths to feed is, Amari Cooper as well. So you get Amari Cooper and James Conner, who once again is literally dominating that Cardinals backfield. And again, they didn't add anybody in the draft at all. Yeah. He's one of the massive winners. So you get Amari Cooper. Exactly. So you get Amari Cooper and James Conner, who is a top 24, easy RB2 for sure. And Amari Cooper, who in a PPR league was definitely a wide receiver too, for David Bell, who didn't crack the top 45 receivers last year, and Zach Charb, who is literally at least the second on the depth chart coming in as a rookie. So it's not even close for me. That's a tough one when I saw it come through.
Granted, obviously, you don't know who's going to be there at your 108 when you make this trade. But for me, like, I was looking at this just like if I were one of the teams involved, what pick that would have had to be for me to be willing to do it.
Yes.
And I totally get that. Like, for context, the team that moved Cooper and James Conner definitely going into more of a rebuild this coming season. So, like, those two don't make as much sense. I totally get moving aging veterans for future. But when you move them for nothing that helps you in the future, that's what struggles for me. So I think for me, it would have had to be like the 104 to make this make sense. Maybe, like, at least because you know who you're going to get. This, like, Charbonnet could have also been before that, and you couldn't have, like, if you really needed a running back, you might not have even had a chance at him. So I think you could have found a better trade partner, and it's good for the team that got Cooper and Conner because they're in a win now mode. Like, they're going to be bad in 2 to 3 years, probably, I should say. So it makes sense for them to trade a future pick or like a current 2023 first for players. So it's just like, why are we helping the teams that are barely hanging on for a year or two to get better and have a better chance to win now? So looking at this when it came through, I thought right away, and I put this in here where I'm like, usually if you're trading like 2, 3, 4, 5 people, you're like, okay, whoever got the best player overall in the trade, they're the winner. This trade had the best 2 players on the same team. So it's just, it's enough for me.
It's 100% enough.
That's a no for me, dog. All right, moving into much more fun ones to discuss because I'm part of all 3 of these. First off, we had like first day of the rookie draft trade go through where between myself and Josh, another guy in our league, where Kyler Murray and Rashad Penny were traded for the 104, which for context, again, became Jordan Addison, but that 104 was also traded after this. So at the time, Swift had not been moved over.
Yeah.
And Gibbs hadn't been drafted, blah, blah. So.
Yeah. again, this is a tough one for me, and you have this one you really have to look at contextually because uh, Josh already had this is one QB league. It is not a super flex league. He
Yeah,
already had three. He already had three quarterbacks. He added a fourth quarterback to
yeah,
his team and Kyler Murray. You can't be mad at Kyler Murray. If you look at it in a vacuum, if you need a quarterback, Kyler Murray, Rashad Penny for the 1.04. I get it. I get it.
yeah.
But in the context of our league, it did not make sense. Give me
Correct.
essentially the number one receiver, potentially number two receiver, depending on how it falls, instead of a fourth quarterback in a one
Yep.
QB league. As simple
Yep.
as that for me.
When this offer came in, I was like, I know he already has Trevor Lawrence, so I'm like, I guess you're getting Kyler just as like another option. Get like two strong guys, whatever. So then I accepted the trade and
No,
was like, you have
no.
like I think it was Dak and Fields too, so it's also good
Yep.
quarterbacks. It's not even
Oh yeah, and Tua. It's not like Tua was a slouch.
or yeah, excuse me, two
Oh
instead.
no,
So I
no,
just
he had nope, he had Dak and he had Tua and he had Justin Fields and now he has Kyler. He traded one. He's traded one
it's
of them since, but
it's four low QB1s. Like
right.
that's the part I don't get. Penny was more like I was very very high on him, so I wasn't looking to move him, and he was basically like, okay, like what can we do for a package of like Rashad Penny and something for the 104, and that's how this kind of came to be. And for me, I had Lamar, so I was like, I like Kyler, I like having a second option, but I don't think I can pass that up. So it
Yep.
worked out for me, and yeah, in a vacuum, like you said, it probably would have been even, but context wise, not so much.
Yeah.
Speaking of that 104, that became the next package with myself and Nick. So basically, it was a 103 for 104 swap with some extra pieces in there. I'd been talking to him for a little bit about initially trading back from the 2 to the 3, but then once I had the 4, I was like, well, hey, can I lock this up so I don't have to make my 2 decision tougher? And it was I won't usually share conversations of trade discussions, but it was a little bit more of him saying, well, I really, really want running back. And I know I can't get to the 101 because Tyler has it and he's taking
Mm-hmm.
Bijan. And I was like, well, if it helps, the 102 is going to be Gibbs. So like, you're not getting a running back either way. So I was
Yeah.
like, if you're not set on who you want at 3, 4, at least you can get some small stuff, trade back basically for like kind of real NFL teams do. And that's only if you don't prefer one guy or the other at 3 versus 4. And he was like, yep, makes sense to me. So it was essentially the 103 for the 104 plus the 301, which became Tyjae Spears. Not bad at that draft pick.
Yeah.
Deontay Foreman, kind of a flyer for the Bears, since again, they didn't add anybody either. And then a 2025 future pick. So small pieces, but did you have
Yeah.
thoughts on paper for that one?
Yeah, it's not bad. I like the Tajay Spears honestly, and Foreman again. I don't know that he's ever going to be anything super relevant, but for me, I think the hard part is seeing like the thirds. They don't do much, and I'm not saying they're not completely useless, but because that's really all these are is projection and swing and misses. But at that point in a rookie draft, when it is solely a rookie draft, there's these individuals have near zero draft capital, and that's probably the biggest indicator that you should pay attention to if you're thinking in a dynasty league is draft capital is incredibly important. If an NFL team and dress uses that high draft capital on you, it means they're going to give you a shot.
Right.
So when you're getting into rookie third rounds, all those top guys are gone. So sometimes those third rounders, I mean, they really do nothing for me anytime.
Yeah.
But for me, JSN, I feel like again those landing spots were all relatively similar, so I can see people making the argument for whatever you want to say. Quentin Johnson that's tied to Justin Herbert for the rest of his career, which is incredible, having so much more upside. But at some point, you have to bet on talent over that landing spot. So give me the talent of JSN at 103 versus 104 and just some pieces, just for the
Right.
sake of getting pieces.
Yeah. And I guess that's how I looked at it too. Like I had the luxury of having like depth and smaller stuff that I could give away, whereas his depth and especially running backs were very, very bad. So it was kind of like
Hmm.
hey, maybe you can at least rebuild it because even like a third, which isn't normally much, is probably going to be better than some of the guys you have on your team. So it was kind of a targeting people based on their team's needs. But for me, there was a very clear tier break between JSN and the next guy, and this was before the draft had started as well. So looking at it now, like you said, like I think JSN obviously in a worse landing spot with the Seahawks versus Addison with the Vikings opposite
Hmm.
JJ, and then Quentin Johnson in LA. I think those are both better spots. So like it wouldn't surprise me if either of them were better than JSN year
Hmm.
one. But I think long term, and especially when like Tyler Lockett gets the hell out of the way,
Hmm.
then I think JSN is going to be continue to be better. So he just seems like the safe pick, and it felt like it made sense for both sides, especially if the team trading down didn't have a favorite specifically. So last one, we had myself again and Joe, who has been asking me to get Jameson Williams for probably 6 months at least. And I
Mhm.
was really high on him. And this trade didn't come from him getting suspended and then me moving him, because honestly, if it's Dynasty, who cares if he's out for 6 months of or 6 games of 1 year? Like you're playing the long game. So quick aside, those of you that are in dynasty leagues, go and check on Jameson Williams, because if the owner's like sick of, oh, he was injured his whole rookie season and now he's going to miss his
Mhm.
second half of his second season, like you might be able to get him for cheap. But um, we ended up doing a deal for Jameson Williams plus the 203, which again, for context, became Jonathan Mingo, the new drafted player for the Carolina Panthers for receiver. That was given in exchange for the 105 and the 108. So those became Quentin Johnson and Zach Charbonnet. So thoughts on those two?
It's an interesting one. I liked your side better, being the 105 and the 108, kind of initially, and I still probably lean that way because I think Quentin Johnson with Herbert, and I mean literally after this next year, the Chargers have cap space outs for both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and they say like 35 million or something like that in cap space. So I'm like Quentin Johnson in 1 year, more likely 2 years because I'm sure they just restructure and keep one or two of them. But if you're playing the long game in Dynasty, Quentin Johnson tied to Justin Herbert for the rest of his career and probably the number one within 2 years, maybe three if you're really crazy. You got to love that. He's shown the upside, shown the hands. Jameson Williams has done the same thing. He's shown the flashes. Can he stay on the field? Can he produce? They're in Detroit. Jared Goff has probably only got a year or two left, maybe. So quarterback situation kind of potentially up in the air. So I'm probably going to take the 105 and 108 again, not knowing who those people were beforehand versus the Jameson Williams and the 2.03. But if it's relatively even, honestly, at the end of the day.
Yeah, totally fair. It's just whether you believe in Jameson Williams that much. For me, doing this
Hmm.
trade before the NFL draft had gone through and before the rookie draft had really started, I knew the 105 was going to be big, because to me, coming
Hmm.
into this draft, there was a very clear top five and then a tier drop off. So I was like, in my head, I'm going to either get Addison or Quentin Johnson, depending on where they land. And that felt worth it to me. The 108 was a total dart throw, and I didn't
Hmm.
know who to expect for it, but I was just like, another first, I'll take it. Like if you're basically giving me two mid first for Jameson Williams, like that's, I can't really pass
Yeah.
that up. I can probably fill the gaps there. So kind of just depends on like what you need. If you really like are hurting at receiver and you want to just get the guaranteed guy that's already playing versus whoever the rookie consensus end up being, totally fine. But I think two firsts for not necessarily even like a top 20 player. Like usually you're talking about like two firsts for like a low one, high two running back or receiver. So I think if I can move a guy that basically hasn't played, and like there's still a world where
Hmm.
Jameson Williams really doesn't hit. Like he might just kind of turn into that
Hmm.
Deshaun Jackson where he gets a random 70-yard touchdown here and there, but then otherwise doesn't get the targets and the receptions. Like who knows? So Quentin Johnson to me feels a lot better. Like I was very pumped to get
Hmm.
him because he seems very, very similar in his situation to JSN, where they're both coming in as kind of like the like initial
Hmm.
thoughts. That doesn't seem like a great landing spot because they're both behind two other guys. But one of those two, Keenan Allen and Tyler Lockett, is going to be probably gone within the next year or two. And the other one is either going to be there with DK, but plays a very, very different position from JSN in the slot,
Hmm.
or Mike Williams can never stay healthy anyways. So it's like this could turn very, very quickly where it seems like low value a year in, but 2 to 3 years, they could both be just amazing. So yeah, shocker. I'm on my side for my trade, but let's see what
Yeah,
happens.
I'm with you.
All right, moving in a little bit more to, I know we've covered a few of them, but I'm just going to rattle off some actual landing spots for position by position. I'll go position at a time, and then if you just have like a thought or two, we don't have to cover all of these per position, but just anything that stands out to you. So quarterbacks in the actual draft, Bryce Young, of course, went to Carolina. Stroud went at 2 to Houston. Anthony Richardson went to the Colts at 4. Levis dropped down to 34 for the Tennessee Titans. And then Hendon Hooker went in the third round to the Lions.
I love Richardson in Indy. I think that offensive scheme between with him and Jonathan Taylor is going to be mean, and having Pittman there as well is obviously going to be incredible for them. And I actually love Levis to the Titans as well. I would not be surprised for him to come into this year and take over the job halfway through the season. Again, it's the last season that Tannehill's going to be there. There's no way they're going to re-up him. There's no way they're going to sign him, blah, 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 anything like that. They don't have anything committed to him. So I would not be surprised for them to turn to Levis sooner than later. And I like the landing spot for him. I think the run game here for the next year or two will still take some of that pressure off him. He has a little bit of that mobility himself. So I think that's a good landing spot for him as well, and he'll have time to develop.
Yep. We obviously have covered a lot of the top guys already. So
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, with your takes on Levis, I actually really like the spot for Hendon Hooker. I think Detroit's a
Sure.
solid spot to end up, especially because, like you said, Goff could be gone in a year or two.
Mm-hmm.
Hooker's obviously a little bit older, but I think having a spot where he can learn well, he's got a player's coach for sure, and they've got one of the best offensive lines in the league. Plus, they now have a top 12 receiving option who Gibbs was like the number one player on his team for college with overall receivers. So he's
Mm-hmm.
electric. You've obviously got Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then Jameson Williams in a year to 2 years should be great. So I think a lot of playmakers plus what Hendon Hooker does well. I think there's not a lot of spots that could have been a better landing spot for quarterback. And I don't think any of us really expected them to be going in at quarterback early because they just didn't have the right like picks to get any of those top guys. But I could be very interested in him. So if you can get him for like a late third or fourth, even
Mm-hmm.
depending on where he falls, I think he's a good dart throw.
Yeah.
Running backs, we obviously had Bijan at 8 to the Falcons, Gibbs at 12 to Detroit, then a bunch of third round guys. That was apparently the spot to get the running backs. But we had A-Chain to the
Mm-hmm.
Dolphins, Charbonnet to the Seahawks, Kendre Miller to New Orleans, Tajay Spears to the Titans, and Tank Bigsby to the Jaguars, as well as Roshan Johnson in the 4th round to the Bears.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say just because he's obviously generational, but landing with the Falcons had to be one of the best spots that could ever possibly be. First and foremost, Arthur Smith loves to run the football, and we saw that. I mean, the Falcons last year with their hodgepodge of running backs and third and fourth and fifth round draft capital and over 1,000 yards were the second in the NFL in rushing yards. And now you're going to add Bijan Robinson to the back of that and development of Desmond Ritter. So I love that as an amazing spot for him. Kendre Miller in New Orleans, I think he's got a chance to step up quickly with the Kamara suspension. I think Jamal Williams will handle a good amount of that, but Kendre Miller's pretty crazy. And then I'll let you talk to Rashawn Johnson, but I know that's one you like as well, and certainly one that I like as well.
Yeah. For touching on Kendre Miller quick, I think he's another one that could be the landscape could look very differently in a year because I think Kamara could like early bold take, but I think Kamara could like be done with the Saints plan like a year from now, depending on how this suspension and this whole court case works out. So then he's just got to beat Jamal Williams, who they've got an out on in a year or two. Like you mentioned, I really like Rashawn Johnson just because he's more of the unknown where he's got the skills and the talent, but he was obviously behind Bijan for all of college. So it's like he could be the diamond in the rough that nobody looked at because he didn't really play, but it doesn't mean he wasn't this hypothetically, it doesn't mean he wasn't the second best running back in the country. He was just behind the first. So like who knows?
Yes.
And with the Bears not doing anything to address their running backs beyond him, free agency or draft, like you've got to beat out Khalil Herbert, who hasn't done much, and Deonta Foreman, who like his own team didn't really even want. So it's doable there. Kind of a similar situation. My only other like favorable landing spot. I was banging the drum all off season for some running back to end up with the Dolphins, but it ended up being A-Chain, who I didn't scout a ton prior to him landing there, but I think that's one of the best spots.
Yeah.
Like he's a super fast guy, and the Dolphins love speed. And then same thing, he's got Raheem Mostert, who's old and always hurt, and a couple of other guys they brought back where it's just like there's no guy that they're in love with that I could easily see A-Chain showing some flashes as a rookie, and then them being like, you know what, he fits the offense best by every other terrible veteran. Let's see what we can do with him. So
I'll give you one quick one here that one other one that just didn't happen to be on the list, and simply because he might get a little bit overlooked and maybe not great in redrafts, but if potentially not even drafted in rookie drafts, but I would think he would be. But got 6th round draft capital, Deuce Vaughn to the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Deuce Vaughn to the Cowboys. First and foremost, if you haven't watched the video, go find it. Reunited with his father there. Amazing. He was the one who got to make the call. Hey, want to come to work with dad next week? That's incredible. So super awesome for him, but great landing spot for him. Potentially re-sign Zeke, but that's going to be a short-term thing. Pollard's going to be the one there, but you're not really scared of Malik Davis. And if you go back and watch some Kansas State Deuce Vaughn highlights, you will be impressed, I promise.
and you know that the team's going to want to give him a chance just based on that whole thing. Like it's a feel good story. But on top of that too, like for those of you that want to dart throw, especially when there's really no guarantees left in the late second, third
Hmm.
round of your rookie drafts, Pollard's on the franchise tag. Like there's a world where they don't re-sign him because he
Yes,
wants too much money. So if you're looking for next year, like there's nobody under contract for more than a year that could be in his way. So I
correct.
love that too.
Yep.
Going into wide receivers, which is obviously like the biggest category, we had four in a row, as we talked about.
Hmm.
JSN at 20 to the Seahawks, 21 was Quentin Johnson to the Chargers, 22 was Zay Flowers to the Baltimore Ravens, 23 was Addison to the Vikings. The second round, we had Rashee Rice to the Chiefs, Mingo to the Panthers, and Jaden Reed to the Packers. And then third, we had Josh Downs to the Colts, Marvin Mims to the Broncos, and Jalen Hyatt to the Giants. Any standout thoughts there?
I mean, we've talked enough about some of the upper ones. I love Hyatt to the Giants. There's not really a whole lot of pass catchers that are in the way there. The Isaiah Hodgins of the world and things like that don't really scare you. He's got a chance to come in there and really um, put up numbers. I think if nothing else, this kind of solidifies, like we've talked about, Darren Waller. He's going to be the target hog there. They didn't do anything too crazy in the draft and put up capital to go get a receiver. So Darren Waller continues to shoot up draft boards, in my opinion. One of the other ones, I do love Josh Downs in
Yeah.
Indy as well. I think that's one of my favorites. I'm a North Carolina guy, as everybody can see. So watching him play is incredible, and he's an amazing slot receiver. So I think that duo is going to be pretty nasty.
Yeah, I like that. To touch on a few of the other ones, which is weird, you talked about all the ones I wasn't gonna, so this is perfect.
Wonderful.
I was very high on Marvin Mims coming into the draft. I was excited about him, and I thought he could be a potential like second or whatever steal depending on the landing spot. Don't
Hmm.
love it in Denver. Obviously, there's a handful of guys all in the way, so we'll see in a year or two, like if maybe something shakes out there depending on who they move on from. But Jonathan Mingo is interesting. They drafted
Hmm.
him higher than I expected. He didn't have the production in college, so it was kind of a surprise pick. Like he wasn't, great, wasn't putting up stuff in the stat sheet or anything. But a high second round pick, so you've got the draft capital. Carolina is another situation of receivers like we talked about before, where it's veterans and old like aging guys that haven't done a lot in his way, like Adam Thielen and DJ Shark. They just signed this offseason. They could be both out of the way in a year or two, and it might be a situation where Mingo and Bryce Young like work together
Yeah.
enough as rookies in their class coming in, where he might kind of just become his like check down guy, so to speak.
Hmm.
Um, I think Jaden Reed in Green Bay is interesting. I think he could be
Hmm.
decent opposite of Christian Watson, and he could possibly push Dubs for like the number two spot. The problem is I don't know that it's going to be exciting enough depending on like what Love looks like passing wise. So it's just like I like the
Hmm.
player, I like the spot. I don't know if I love the passing pie. And then the only
Yeah.
other one I'm going to say, I don't know how you feel about this, but Rashee Rice into the Chiefs is a trap to me. I know
Yes,
I am not doing
it
any
is.
part of it. He is the Sky Moore 2.0 of last year. Everyone's like, oh my God, the Chiefs. Can you imagine Patrick Mahomes throwing to him? No, it's not. It's just because he gets drafted to a spot doesn't mean he's good. I think
Mm-mm.
Kadarius Toney is going to end up being the number one receiver for them and is going to look way better because he can do more in that offense. And I think it's more of a gadget offense, which isn't a knock because the Chiefs are very, very smart and Andy Reid's a genius. But I think they're not going to do the prototypical receiver that gets 10 targets. It's going to be the sweeps and the screens and like the dink and dunk stuff. And Kadarius Toney is perfect for that. And also they have this guy called Travis Kelsey. So
Hmm.
I just Rasheed Rice, don't do it with your late first or early second. If he falls, great, take a shot. But like,
Hmm.
there's better guys here. I would take pretty much anyone else that we've mentioned above him. So
Agreed.
that's
One
that.
final, one final one, just because I like continue to
Yeah.
throw wrenches into, and back to Green Bay actually, which just makes me vomit every time
Mm.
it comes out of my mouth. Dontavian Wicks. Remember the name. I would not be surprised to see him push Jaden Reed's of the world. A little less polished, obviously, than Jaden Reed. He is a big play guy. I think he averaged just over 21 yards a catch in college. So fifth round draft capital, nothing that they're gonna say they're committed to him, but he's a big play waiting to happen. So I could see him pushing for some time as kind of wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4.
Yeah. It's kind of like a Christian Watson, Romeo Dubs situation of last year with
Mm-hmm.
both of those. So that could be interesting.
Yep.
Tight ends, we won't cover a lot, but the big three. Dalton Kincaid went 25 to Buffalo. Sam Laporta actually hopped Michael Mayer. He was at 34 to the Detroit
Mm.
Lions, and Michael Mayer went 35 to the Raiders. So anything dynasty or redraft for any of these guys?
Nothing crazy. I was kind of surprised Buffalo went with Kincaid, just because they obviously have a good tight end already there. Nothing crazy. Michael Mayer in Oakland. I think honestly they're going to use him as more so of a blocker. Phenomenal blocker. Phenomenal blocker. So I don't know that he's gonna. He obviously didn't test great at the combine as well. So that I think is what slid him down the boards. He's a great tight end, but I don't know that he's going to have as much utility as he would have had somewhere else.
Yeah, agreed. I like the landing spots for Laporta in Detroit and Mayer in
Hmm.
Oakland, but I don't know that that's enough for me. Like,
Right.
they've all got better receiving options, obviously, and I just don't trust rookie tight ends. I think people talk about in dynasty leagues where it takes like 2 to 3 years for them to even remotely have the playbook down and make an
Yeah.
impact. And even then, tight ends have like a 30% hit rate when drafted in the first round compared to like receivers that are like a 60% or something crazy. So
Hmm.
I definitely wouldn't use your first round picks on them personally, even if that's
Hmm.
probably when they're going to go and they're not going to be there. Like, I would not take Kincaid until at least the second round, and I probably would take a shot on a running back or a receiver instead. I just don't. This doesn't excite me. I think Laporta is maybe the best option, but same
I
like
I agree.
I saw this today in Keep Trade Cut. I think all three of them were listed at least as top 10 tight ends, and that just
Ooh,
seems crazy
wow.
to me. I think it was
Yeah,
like
that's
six,
crazy.
8, and 10, but still,
Hmm.
it was like, like, I mean, at that point, I guess you're taking a shot because after the top four, it doesn't matter. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's like they're going to take a while. Like, if you draft them, they're not going to help your team for multiple seasons. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. I think Laporta's the best of that option, and that's simply because I'm not betting against an Iowa tight end ever again. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing
yeah,
it. It's a tight end factory, period.
especially filling the Hawkinson role, I'm like, oh, of
Yeah.
course, that's where you go. So
Yeah.
all right, going into a little bit more league specific again, I'm just going to run through our rookie draft that actually the 3 round 12 team one quarterback rookie draft just ended a couple days ago, but
Hmm.
I'm going to do just the first round and then we're going to do a few questions, just kind of wrap things up with reactions. So I'll give you the owner that took it as well, and you're gonna hear about two names the entire time. So Tyler, of course, had the 101 with Bijan locked in 8 months ago.
That's right.
I took Jameer Gibbs at 2 and then traded up to 3 to get JSN as well. Nick had Jordan Addison at 4. I then took Quentin Johnson at 5. Connor had the kind of first surprise of the draft, taking Anthony Richardson at 6. Foster then took A-Chain at 7. I took Zach Charbonnet at 8. Connor went back to back at 9 and 10 with Kendre Miller and Zay Flowers, who slid down the board a bit. Nate finally went with the first tight end off the board, Dalton Kincaid at 11, so not terrible, kind of right on the border. And then I also had the 12th pick and went with Bryce Young at 12. So that was our first round rounding it out. We had a few names that we've already discussed slip into the second, so there was definitely some good value there.
Hmm.
Um, Based on just the first round, were there any reactions that you had or favorite / surprise picks overall?
I can't believe Zay fell to 10. I really can't. It was absolutely brutal, and Connor can tell you, and I'm sure he'll listen to this. I bet you I sent him 30 trade offers. We talked back and forth for so long, and we were so close.
Oh, really?
Um,
Okay.
oh yeah, we were super close. And ultimately, as you kind of saw in some of the messages, he was like, "I got so many trades requests that I just picked somebody because it was done." I get it. There's so much that comes into it, and I even tried. I was like, I'm going out into 2024, but that was the hard part for me. Is I got a lot of key receivers that I needed with other draft picks. I traded like my second round to get Deontay Johnson. And so I traded the picks for this year really for tangible pieces into the year. So I only had the 1.1. So I
Yeah.
really didn't have any capital to bargain with or to say, hey, move back just a little bit. Here's an extra piece. So it was hard to get on the same page. But having Zay fall to 10 and me being so close, I tried to trade for him at whatever his original pick was, 6 or something like
6, I
that.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he traded out and kept trading out. And I'm like, if he's still there, please come back to me. I don't care. I'll take the 9 or the 10, whichever one you don't want. If you have somebody at
Yeah.
9, get them. But because my target is Zay, and it didn't work out. So that was a tough one for me.
Yeah.
He feels like the one that got away.
Yeah, totally agreed. I think this was just a product of our draft where I
Yeah.
was talking with a couple of other guys that I traded in and out with, and I was talking actually with Connor about trading a different pick to try to get Anthony Richardson. But
Mm,
with me having 5, and I talked about like the top 5 being a clear break, I was like, Zay is technically the 6th best player ADP wise, but
mm,
Connor going Anthony Richardson made sense, and Connor having picks 6, 9, and 10. He's, for those of you that didn't know, he's the Rashad Bateman owner, so it makes sense not taking Zay Flowers because you don't want two pieces of that same offense.
Yeah.
And then I had the 8, and I have Mark Andrews, and I was like, I don't really want another Ravens receiver either. So it was like picks 6 through 10, all but one of them didn't make sense to take Zay. And then 7 at Foster was like, my receivers are great. I'm just taking the best running back. So it was just kind of like
Yeah.
I was talking about it at 12 being like, if he's not taken, I feel like I just have to, but it's sometimes it happens where if you've just got another receiver on the same team, it feels gross to do that. So that's going to happen. Like if you're sitting there being like, oh great, there's only 4 or 5 great players and I've got 7, what am I going to do? Stuff happens. Like if the number 5 pick has, say, Mike Williams or Keenan Allen, they might not take Quentin Johnson. Like you don't know. Or that might be a situation where you can trade up to get somebody because they're just like, make the decision for me. I'd rather just have whoever is left over kind of thing. So that was the surprise. But also I think as the draft was happening, I was like, no one's going to take him here. No one's going to take him here either. Maybe I assumed Nate would take him at 11 because I thought Connor was going to keep passing. So that was, it was a unique situation. The only other ones that I think were somewhat of a surprise to me, obviously we talked about like Anthony Richardson makes sense and I like the pick, but I didn't expect him to do it at 6. I thought he would go with one of the quarterbacks at 9 or 10. And I think I was hoping he would assume a quarterback wouldn't be there because I wouldn't advise taking him at 8 either. Cause I don't think you need quarterbacks versus shots at running back and wide receiver, but me just having basically half the first round, I was like, I'm taking him at 8 if I can get him. So that was a bummer. And then the only other one that's maybe, I don't know if it's controversial because I think people could go either way, but taking A-Chain over Charbonnet, I think a lot of people are out on the landing spot of Charbonnet. I'm just trying to stay strong and be like, he had the draft capital, which was still decent. He has the talent. Tons of people were high on him. Most people didn't even really think to look at A-Chain before the draft pick came in. So it's just kind of like I gotta hope that you bet on the talent and stick with Charbonnet and something happens in a year or two. But that would be the only one that maybe is a surprise compared to how I had my players ranked. So
Yeah. Nothing else crazy for sure. I think we talked about it off air, and we said, "Hey, when's the first quarterback going to go, and when do we think they should go?" And I said Connor. I said my guess was Connor, and I said Connor, but I said at his 1.9 or 1.10, just simply because he had them back to back. He took it a little bit earlier. So looking at team context is a huge thing going into these drafts. Know who maybe has kind of a mid-tier guy, a Dak Prescott of the world, and saying, hey, this guy is probably going to go get a quarterback. So if I, for whatever reason, want one of those, I better move above him, try to get him to trade out, et cetera, et cetera. So team context is so much exactly like we just talked about for the last 5 minutes of when these individuals could go. So pay attention to that going into them. And just like the real NFL draft, if somebody else has a team need and you have that same team need, you better trade with them or trade above them.
Yep. Well said. We didn't cover obviously the second and third rounds, but as far as overall picks, just looking at the draft board, did you have a favorite value pick from the second or third round of our specific draft?
I think in the second round, I was looking through them. I love the Rashawn Johnson in the middle. I think he maybe should have went a little bit sooner than that. And then the other one in the third round, I talked about it already. I love the Deuce Vaughn. He went with the 3.02 or something like that. Again, he didn't have draft capital attached to him being a 5th rounder. So wasn't surprised he was still there in the third round, but I think he's going to return much more value than a normal third round rookie draft pick does.
Yeah, totally agree. My first one was Rashawn Johnson, and I talked about him a bunch before, so I'll leave that as is. I think that maybe in our context, either Jonathan Mingo, again, Mingo going at 203 behind Rashee Rice was shocking to me. I was trying to trade back up with Mingo, but I had the same situation as you where I'm like, I don't have anything to give you. And every player on my bench except one is better or more valuable than Mingo. So I'm like, I got nothing, even though I want him. Or Jaden Reed going to 207. I feel like that felt a little too low. The only other later one beyond Deuce Vaughn, I think 303 Chase Brown, who not necessarily the talent, but more of the landing spot, him going in like the early 5th round to Cincy when they still haven't come out and said anything about Joe Mixon. Like there was some presser where I think they asked the general manager or the owner like a week or two ago, and they were like, so based on, not trading for any big name players or signing any free agent running backs, like, does that mean Joe Mixon's your guy going forward? And he was like, yep, he is on our team as of now, and he is our running back as of this point. Like, that's not a good glowing recommendation. So I think even if
No.
he plays this season, I could see them cutting him or moving on next season, and maybe they bring
Yeah.
somebody else in. But if you're looking in the third round, like once Deuce Vaughn was gone, I think the next guy right behind him should have been Chase Brown, just based on he might get the work on a cheap deal because they need to afford to pay Higgins and Jamar and Burrow. So I
Yeah,
like those.
100% agreed with you on that. I had forgotten about the Chase Brown pick as well. But again, remember they also got rid of P Ryan. P Ryan is in Denver now,
Yeah.
people. So that's a pretty glowing recommendation. One of Joe Mixon for the Bengals. So for those that are looking in redraft leagues, Joe Mixon is going to be the guy this
Oh,
year.
yeah.
But they might just run him into the ground and say, "All right, peace out, see you later." So when you're looking in Dynasty, look that year ahead, look that 2 years ahead, look when contract extensions or contracts are about to be up, look when they have outs. There's plenty of websites that you can go look at it. So it never hurts to look a year ahead or 2 years ahead and say, okay, hey, maybe this guy doesn't look valuable now, but in a year, like we've talked about with some of these receivers, he's got a great chance to step into the lead role pretty quickly.
It's a very big mindset shift where you're just like,
It
no,
is.
but this guy is the starter this year. And you're like, yeah, but what are they going to do next year? So it doesn't
Yeah.
matter anymore. Like that's
Yeah.
offloading those guys in Dynasty that have 1 year left. And people are like, oh, I could win now. And I'm like, yeah, but if you don't, I just got rid of him for somebody who's going to help me for 5 years. So stuff like
Yes.
that is key. A couple of other ones, which I think some people would be surprised to see this. Again, we only had 3 rounds. Some leagues have like 4 or 5, but
Hmm.
in our 3 round draft, after the top 3 quarterbacks, no other quarterbacks were taken. So were you surprised that Will Levis or Hendon Hooker weren't even drafted by anybody?
I was, and I probably I would have if I would have had any picks.
Yeah.
I would have gotten one of them. Simply because again, in Dynasty, for those that haven't played, you have a taxi squad. So that
Mhm.
means they're eligible to sit on your taxi squad and don't take a roster spot beyond the taxi squad, however big they might be, usually 3 or 4 players for 2 years. So they can just sit there for 2 years. So if you have maybe in a one quarterback league, and you want to throw one of those guys on your taxi squad, I'd say it's 100% worth it if you think they have that upside. So for me, I'd probably still be Levis and then Hooker in that order. But I was very surprised neither of them got drafted. And
Yeah.
first
I would
waiver one, they both went.
right. I would have expected Levis to be more of like a late second kind of thing once the
Hmm.
next tier of meh flex guys were gone. And then Hooker should have at least been like an early to mid third. I would have taken him
Yeah.
100% if I had my pick still and didn't move him. But um, for context, I picked up Will Levis for $2 the day after the draft, and Jordan got Hendon Hooker also for $2, where I didn't need him. I have Lamar, and I just spent the 112 to get Bryce Young. But I was like, literally, the first round of betting went through, and Hooker was picked up, but not Levis. And I was like, okay, if Levis goes through twice, like I'm going to make sure somebody
Hmm.
gets him. So I'm going to put $2 on him and got him for it. So I'm like, I obviously don't need him. I'm not ever going to have a world where I start him over Lamar, and probably not Bryce Young either. But the chance that he turns into something and I can flip him for a second round pick just because he's a well known quarterback, like that's worth it. So
Yeah.
they should be getting drafted bare minimum. And like you said, if you've got those taxi spots, like I'll stick 2 of my 4 taxi spots on the quarterbacks and just wait and see what happens. And if they suck in 2 years,
Sure.
okay, bye, fine. Like Levis can be
Yeah.
cut, but
Right.
yeah. So rounding that out with all the discussion on the dynasty rookie drafts, do you have any tips for people doing theirs coming up? Since a lot of people are probably not done with theirs like we are.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of talked about tips and tricks throughout this. I think a lot of it is really understanding what your team need is right now. Um, are you one piece away or are you 5 pieces away? In Dynasty world, if it's Ricky Bobby style, if you're not first, you're last. Simple as that. If you don't think you're going to win it here now in the next 2 to 3 years, start looking at those older guys, which running back wise is pretty much anybody over 25 years old, 26, 27, 28. See what you can flip them for. Look for those individuals on the contrary that are in win now mode and see what you can get. As you see coming into this year, those 2023 picks were useless to people this time last year. Maybe a little bit more over the summer as the NFL actually started. But looking at those future picks now and trading those veterans to win now guys can net you some great assets here in the future.
Yeah, you have to play it like a 5 or a 10 year window. You can't just be looking at, well, my team's bad now and I want to get better. It's not redraft. Like it's gonna suck and it's gonna be really boring, but there's gonna be points where you just have to say, okay, 2 to 3 years, this is just the league that I'm just not going to win. And like, be smart on the little pickups and stuff. It doesn't mean totally check out, but
Hmm.
you have to be okay with doing that if your team's not in that position, because the absolute worst thing you could be is like 5th to 8th. You're just going to stay there
Yes.
forever. So if it means just completely dogging it and being bad for a year or two and then getting the Bijans of the world or rebuilding with some like young up and coming talent, stuff like that, that's how you win. Like, some people, great. If they got lucky on the redraft when none of us knew how values were going to work out, that happens. But that's a lot
Hmm.
more luck involved because none of us know. Whereas building for Dynasty Future, like, that's how you build a dynasty. So like, we
Hmm.
know what our player values are at this point. So it's moving on from guys that aren't going to help you for what your window is.
Correct. Correct.
The only
Yeah.
other thing I
Prime.
will add to, oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Yeah, I was gonna
Okay.
say the main prime example of that too. And again, I've been trying to do that, so no harm, no foul with the individuals that I've tried to trade for. But I mean, in our league, I've been trying to trade for the Austin Ecklers of the world. I've been trying to trade for the Derrick Henrys of the world because I'm like, those individuals can help me now, and I got enough receivers in the offseason that if I get one more running back, I can make a run at it. And those individuals flip them for something because next year they're like, oh hey, well I'll just hold on to them
Right.
because I don't like the offer. Okay, that's great. But if you continue to do that, now next year they're worth less. Now next year they're worth less. Now next year they're worth less. So you can either do it now and say, great, tank mode, let's do it. Let's get some young guys, or start doing the opposite and sell off those young guys and start getting the old vets and make a run at it now yourself. Those are your two
Right.
options. Sell
Yeah.
them now and get your future assets and say, okay, great, I've accepted it. I'm going into tank mode, or the exact opposite. All right, I'm selling my young guys that are in tank mode and give me the people that are going to help me win now. Simple as that.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. It's very, very tough when you're in that position because you're like Derrick Henry, for example. He's a running back one. He's a league winner in redraft. He's a top
Hmm.
5 pick. I can't just give him away for nothing. That very well may be, but say he's worth $100 right now. Running backs fall off so quickly that he could be worth 10 next year. And it's like,
Hmm.
that's great. You had him for one more year while you at the same time took 11th. But like, does that matter to you? Yeah, you might not want to just give him away to somebody a la the Amari Cooper and James Conner trade. Sure. But
Hmm.
like,
Well, yeah.
if you can get something, even if it's, hey, you know what? Give me your 2024 second pick and your 2025 first. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
anything to me if I'm a contender. Fine. Like, maybe somebody does that, or maybe just the 2025, whatever. But then you're like, I'm going to be bad in 2023 and 2024 anyways. So maybe my
Hmm.
pick in 2 years is a top 3. And then I have that pick and I can go and do this for like other picks. Like, you just kind of have to pick a window out and say,
Yeah.
this is what I'm going for. So,
Hmm.
yeah. All right. Um, I think that's all we got. That's it. I didn't realize we got to there when we did, but
Fantastic.
easy. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
We're
a
not
no trade.
we're not doing a draft for those of you that are listening, just because we have a lot more stuff to talk about post NFL draft, but
Hmm.
potentially our next one, since we'll be in the middle of like summer with nothing happening anymore and boring fantasy
Yeah.
football news. So we'll get back into those then. So if you guys have any fun topics or stuff you want us to draft, I've also considered like maybe bringing in another person or two just for fun, so we can get like more than 2 people picking, just so there's a little bit more
Hmm.
strategy in the stuff. So we might look at that. Next episode's probably going to be a month out, so I'm looking at probably like first week-ish of June, somewhere
Hmm.
around there. But all of that's going to factor into a certain little one that's on the way, so that might
Heyo.
change, subject to
Yeah.
subject to change. We'll see. But yeah, so we'll keep bringing you guys some stuff on there. We're going to do a lot more of the shorts based on all the content here, so please check those out, comment on those or our main video here.
Hmm.
Tell your friends and stuff. Quick little shout outs to friends of the show before we get into our wrap up things. Minnesota Sports, as always, they record on Wednesdays on Facebook Live. Again, just covering all Minnesota sports stuff. So, not the Timberwolves anymore because we suck. The Twins are borderline, whether we suck, as always. Wild, yeah, they also suck. So,
Hmm.
Minnesota sports, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of personal and angry rants and stuff, but
Hmm.
they're good and they're supporters of our show, so we appreciate those guys. ADH dads, I keep shouting them out. They're doing kind of around like a 1 episode a week thing of nothing to do with sports whatsoever. It's just random topics and kind of life stories and just fun discussion things. So they're really, really big on engaging and commenting back when you comment on their YouTube or Spotify audio episodes. So go check them out if you want something a little different, just easy listening. And then a new addition, we have another friend of the show called the Game Boys that's going to be doing a more of a video game focus. They're going to be part of like a 4 or 5 different channel group that is doing. One's going to do like video game reviews for new ones. Another one's going to be doing like let's play stuff. There's going to be another streamer thing. A lot of different stuff happening. They're just starting out, and I'm part of one of them on the reviewing side, along with my buddy John. But they're going to be shouting us out on their channels too. So just wanted to give them a quick shout out as well. So friends of the show, check them out in the links and stuff in the show notes below.
Fantastic.
Anyways,
I like it.
any
No.
closing thoughts or notes or things that we didn't cover yet?
I don't think so. I know draft season, rookie draft season for Dynasty is going to start to kick into full effect. Obviously, we're going to have a whole lot more to talk about come August as we get a little bit closer. So the next couple months, we'll keep cutting these up and get you guys some good content. But yeah, a little bit slower here now that all the big news for the NFL is kind of out of the way, really until actual camps and things like that start.
Yeah.
So enjoy it while you can, Dynasty nerds. If you guys got questions, throw them our way. If you guys have comments, you love our takes, hate our takes, I promise we got pretty thick skin. It's just football. It's supposed to be fun. So we appreciate all the subs that go through it, that come through from the videos. Seems like you guys have really enjoyed them. Get 400 or 500 views on each of those, so we're going to continue to kick those up. So we're having a blast doing it. We hope you guys enjoy the video component of what we're doing, and if not, hey, sorry, you got to see our face more, but we're having fun.
We'll try to be better. I'll try to be better looking from now on.
I know, yeah. I got nothing, and you're gonna have a kid soon, and that's only gonna go downhill as the sleep goes downhill.
The stress and wrinkles and everything.
I was gonna say, as you can see, like he's got his hair done. He doesn't have any kids yet. There's a reason I have a hat on. I was like, I got 2 kids, so you just kind of, it just is what it is.
Curly afro hair. This is just how my hair looks all the time. I don't put anything into it. It's just, if I get it any longer, I can't even wear a baseball cap. So
I love
that's
it.
my life.
I love it.
Perfect. On
All
that
right.
completely relevant note, we'll wrap it up here. Thank you guys for listening as always, and we will see you in a month.
All right, peace out, Pod Squad.
Bye.